great to be at reInvent with you today. Thank you for taking time out of your schedule to come and explore agents with us. As Mark said, my name is Sean Swanner. I'm the Chief Technology Officer at Athene. We are a leading provider of fixed and fixed-indexed annuities, and we're based in West Des Moines, Iowa. In addition to our retail business, we have a reinsurance business, and an aspect of this reinsurance business is when we take on a block from another carrier, there's a large set of data files that are sent to us for processing. We're an insurance company, there's actuarial work, there's processing work, data science work that must happen in order for this business to be properly handled by our systems. This process of doing this is time intensive, and block by block over the years, we take on a set of data, we write code to load the data, and it's accumulated over time a lot of different ways to do the same thing. So recently we started a project to modernize this code. The first thing that we need to do is we need to look at the code, we need to look at the data, and we need to map the data. So in this work, a given data element may come in from a customer file, and it will then go through a series of transformations in code and be mapped to a data value in our systems. So we take these inputs, and then in order to figure out how this data works, a set of highly trained analysts will spend hours going through the code, going through the data, creating mapping documents, creating system documentation and design documentation that we then turn over to our developers to write the refactored code. So our developers then take this data mapping, take the documentation, and then using our current kind of standard approach to, as part of this project, they then replumb the data from what the client sends us to what we need it to be on our systems. This is a manual process. Every customer that we have in this reinsurance business has their own file format. We're in the business of serving them, and so they send us files in the format that works for them. Some customers send us one large file that has everything. Others will send us a zip file with dozens of different files. Sometimes it's in CSV, sometimes it's in XML. These files have, again, no common consistency to them. They're very large, and so for our analysts to even open the files, some of these CSVs have 100-plus columns. They have so many rows that they're difficult to open up on a laptop for review and processing. The code that we have is like any legacy code. It's spread across multiple Python modules and multiple repos, and it's difficult to trace the code as it works its way through the data file to process the output. A classic ETL problem. So what does this mean for us is that as we go through this project of modernizing this block by block, is it takes an extraordinary amount of time. So like many of you, we spent the majority of 2023 really interested in how generative AI could help solve business problems. And in particular, in talking with our AWS partners, we discussed the capabilities that are available to us now in Bedrock. In working with AWS, we took and built a set of agents. And we did this, so here's the first step that we did. And what Mark was describing, that same process is what we took to accomplish this goal. We took the data files and we took the code and we put them in an S3 bucket. Then we defined an agent. And we simply told the agent that your job is to generate the mapping document. And I'll give you an example of a mapping document in a moment. Then we set an action group that did a couple of things. First is we had the agent go through and read the data files and build a map of the data. And again, these data files contain hundreds of different elements. Some of the data elements are sent to us by the customer. Other data elements are determined by our processing code as the result of a calculation of one or more data fields. Then we had to figure out how does a given data element flow through the data files. And again, some are very literal, kind of just in the file you can see it. Others, it may be different Python modules work together through a series of imports in order to run the calculations to determine that value. Once we have that figured out, we're able to create a data mapping document. And this is very simple. This is just a simple markdown document that lists out all of the data elements for a block and helps us understand how we get the data and how we process it. We then take that document and we put it back in that S3 bucket. And this is where it gets really interesting, because then we created a second agent, and the second agent is a knowledge base agent, and it takes the information, the data mapping and the original source code and the original data, and it allows us to have a prompt where our staff can then ask a series of questions about it. So you think about this, if you're an analyst on our team, in order to get to the point where the agents have you now, you would have spent a lot of time manually going through, taking notes, creating spreadsheets, diagramming things, and putting this together. Now our analysts can log in, they can go to the agent, they can ask questions. They can say, for this value, where does it come from? How is this calculation determined? Where in the source code can I find the processing for this given data element? This helps us out in a number of ways. One is it saves us a lot of time. Second, and I agree with what Mark was saying, that we would not have the agent write the final system specification. That's the job of the humans, the highly skilled humans on our team. But what this does do is the agents are able to provide draft language that describe a data element or a calculation. The agents help validate the understanding of the analyst. They can ask it questions and kind of double check their understanding of the data and the code. And this all comes together to save time. In addition, when we give that documentation to our developers, we can also give them access to the agent as well, and they can ask questions, and this will save time where instead of the coders asking the analyst, they can start at least by asking the agent their questions. Okay, here's what it looks like. I know 12 rows may not seem like a whole lot, but this is a subset of the hundreds of rows of data that we have generated by the agent. And what we have with this agent is this mapping. These columns of data it would otherwise take a lot of time to build, and this provides a documentation reference that both feeds the documentation that the humans are creating and powers the knowledge base for the other agent. And then on the right, you can see an example of the agent prompts and the ability to ask questions in a chat feature, chat interface. And this is using the knowledge base in a RAG style way to say the prompt, and we're using Claude 2 on this particular example. But it's also integrated with the knowledge base that has all that information in that bucket. And we take that information, we then have a chat response that goes and interrogates the knowledge base to give the answer. So what did we get out of all this work? Well, the first thing is the agent was very effective at handling the large data files. And again, for our analyst, even opening the files in some cases was a challenge. The agent was able to process these large files, both wide in terms of columns and long in terms of number of rows, do analytics on the file. And the agent is good at taking the Python source code files and reverse engineering the calculations out of them. In addition, the data mapping document that I showed on the prior slide is a very valuable output that saved us a lot of time. And the agent with the Q&A ability is going to create kind of a lasting and durable asset for us. One of the nature of reinsurance is that this block of business could be on our books for many years, and it may outlast some of the developers and staff on the team. But having this documentation and this agent will provide a kind of an active live documentation source for us. So, in our project plan, we had a phase where the analysts were to spend a 2-week block of time doing this data mapping and this analysis. From the point that we loaded the code and the data into that S3 bucket and ran the agent, we were able to produce the data mapping file in a matter of minutes. What this allows us to do is give our analysts more interesting and valuable work to do. It's not fun pouring through someone else's old code and figuring out the business logic. What these analysts can do instead is do higher value things. There's a lot of work to do. Once we get this ETL process done, there's a lot more work to do. Mapping it into our data model, figuring out whether the data is suitable for use in our actuarial systems. And these staff can then focus on those outcomes. But we're not done. I think it gets better. Like this is a POC that we put together fairly quickly, but with some impressive results. The next thing that we're going to do is we're going to take these agents and we're going to expand them to more blocks of data. And some of these blocks of data will have different data formats, different structures, and different expectations on how we need to load and process the data. Some of our code that processes these blocks of data could be more challenging, and we're going to keep evolving and adapting the agents to do more and more work like this. Second, and this is a key takeaway for you, is we will always be in a process of fine-tuning our prompts. This is a key thing that we've learned as we've worked with all of our agents on our AI work, is that prompt engineering and prompt tuning is not a once-and-done activity. That as you go through those screens that Mark will show in the demo coming up, you see there's opportunities to use natural language to explain to the agent what the agent should accomplish. And it's important to continually evaluate and tune that. This week, we heard that now Bedrock supports Claude 2.1, and that moving from even 2.0 to 2.1 should trigger a retuning of your prompts and a reevaluation to make sure that everything is still working correctly. Then the next thing that I'm really excited about is the goal of this project is to actually refactor our code, not just to do the analysis. And I'm really confident that we can take an agent and we can say, let's say that you took this data element and you mapped it out from the customer source file through the transformation into our standard data model, and now we need to do something with it, or even put it in the standard data model. The agent, with some training, with some sample code, and with some guidance, I strongly believe we could have an agent that then says, here's the proposed code to do that work and to do that transformation, and to actually have the agent participate in some of the code writing work that we have to do in the future. This is where it gets really exciting, because now what the agents do is across all elements of our project, we take the kind of the grunt work, if you will, kind of the repetitive, more tedious work, and we have agents do that, and then that takes and allows our highly skilled staff to focus on more meaningful and value additive work. And I'm really excited to get to that point.